welcome. This is indeed a notable occasion. Once more, we've come together as a community in Brussels, 1 year after our last annual meeting in the capital of Europe. And much has happened with the initiative for co-regions in transition in the Western Balkans and Ukraine over the last 12 months. We've had peer exchanges, tailored regional workshops, webinars. There is much to talk about, so it's good to be getting this annual meeting underway. I'm Robert Pollock, and I'm going to be the Master of Ceremony for this event over the coming day and a half. I see many familiar faces in the room, which is always a lovely sight. However, for those of you who do not know me, I'm a senior advisor with the European Union Co-Regions in Transition Initiative, the sister initiative to the Western Balkans and Ukraine CRIT initiative. I must say, I'm absolutely delighted that we have actually 400 delegates involved in this event in the annual meeting. We have obviously many people in the room today, but we have many joining us online. And just to put that in context, 400 people, that represents roughly 1/4 of all the contacts we have in our database. So it is quite an impressive turnout, and obviously shows a high degree of interest in the initiative. So, first of all, I'd just like to do the housekeeping, get the rather tiresome but important things out the way. Obviously, there will be coffee breaks served outside the meeting room. You're familiar with that space. In regard to asking questions, I'd ask physical participants to raise your hand, and you will be provided with a mic in due course. And online participants should use Slido to submit your questions. Now, I'm going to be saying a few more words about Slido in a moment, so please bear with me. Now, you'll notice that you all have different color-coded lanyards, and the code for the colors is on the screen. So you see them in front of you. For example, orange is Bosnia and Herzegovina, red is Kosovo, blue is Montenegro, etc. And please do use this as an opportunity to network with your colleagues, but colleagues from different contexts and experiences. No fire drill is planned, so if the alarm does go off, please head to the nearest emergency exit as signed. And I should note that a recording of this event will be available, so please do not feel obliged to take lots of notes, because a recording will be available in due course. As I said, the interpretation is available in a number of languages, and I'll be giving you the codes for those languages in a moment. Please, in-person participants, obviously use your interpretation headsets, and I see that's quite obvious because most of you have them on. And for those who are joining us online, and there are many, if you could select the language channel on the streaming platform to follow the interpretation, that would be greatly appreciated. Please do remember, when speaking and asking questions, do speak slowly, ask your question slowly and clearly. Obviously, that will greatly aid the interpreters. And there is the slide just showing you the relevant channel number for the languages. I mentioned that we will be using Slido for posing questions, but also for polls. So let's just spend a moment with Slido, getting you familiar with Slido. There we go. So we have Slido for questions on site and for online participants, and it is also the means by which you can ask questions and take part in polls. So there should be a QR code coming up momentarily, and I'd ask you to use your phone to access Slido using the QR code. If joining online, you can also access Slido by using slido.com in your browser. And obviously there's a code, so to reply to the polls or to ask your questions, you need to access the code WBUA in capital letters. And never forget to press the submit button. And questions, please, should be submitted in English. Where there is not the opportunity to answer your question, we will in due course. So there's the Slido code, QR code, so please use that. And obviously, just to get you familiar with Slido, which obviously many of you are, we're asking, which country do you represent? So please, I'll give you a few moments to answer that question, both those in the room and those online, because I see the response level is still quite low at 25, so I'm going to stand here until it gets considerably higher than that. So just take your time and use the QR code to access Slido and put in WBUA. Well, we seem quite stuck at 25 responses, which somewhat surprises me, but I will give you some time. Pardon? Victoria, is there an issue with Slido? We do seem to be stuck at 25 responses. Bear with us. Is there an issue with Slido? Some people have said from the audience that the code isn't working. Could we just have some clarification? It's working. As you can see, we actually now have a lot more people voting, which is very positive. So we've asked how many annual events of the initiative for co-regions in transition in the Western Balkans and Ukraine have you attended? So it's good to see that many of you are first-time attendees. So welcome. I've attended one in the past. That's very positive. And we have actually quite a significant minority, 1 in 5, have attended previous events. Okay. Right, we're at 100. I always think when you hit the 100, you have actually got acceptance of the technology. So great. I'm wondering, can we go back to the previous slide just to see where people came from? And there we have it. We're still actually only at 25 for that question. But we're soaring ahead here. Excellent. Okay, we're close enough to 100, so I'm delighted to see a significant level of participation from Ukraine. So welcome those in the room and those online. We also have quite a significant number of delegates from the EU, but I'm not surprised at that because there's such a profound interlinkage about what's happening in the Western Balkans and Ukraine with what is actually happening in the European Union with its Green Deal. And obviously, we have delegates from Bosnia, Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia, and North Macedonia and Kosovo. So, excellent. So, I think we have tested the technology, and that has given us some very interesting questions. So, we will now move on, if I may. Right. Now, with the housekeeping over, we now move on to the more important aspect of this opening session. And I'm delighted to say we have Cristina Lobillo, who is the Director for the Energy Platform Task Force in DG ENER of the European Commission. And I'll be handing over to Cristina in a moment, but just a few words of introduction about Cristina. Cristina is originally from Cordoba in Spain, and she is a lawyer by training. Having previously worked in the Spanish government, she joined the European Commission in 2004. From 2014 to 2019, she was head of the cabinet of the EU Commissioner for Climate Action and Energy, Miguel Arias Cañete. In this position, she had an important role in the EU team that was involved in delivering the historic Paris Agreement at COP21. Effectively, we're just transition started with the opening agreement. From June 2020 to June 22, she was Director for Energy Policy, Strategy and Coordination in DG Energy. In this role, she was heavily involved in the preparations of the legislative proposals of the Fit for 55 package. Her responsibilities as Director also included overseeing international relations on energy issues, coordination with member states, as well as with the EU institutions, together with the communication, legal and economic aspects of EU energy policy. So I can think of no one better to be opening our event this afternoon. So please, Cristina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Robert, and dear guests, participants and colleagues, good afternoon. It is my pleasure today to welcome to this annual meeting of the Initiative for Coal Regions in Transition in the Western Balkans and Ukraine. Let me start by expressing my gratitude to the 6 international partners to the initiative: the World Bank, the Energy Community Secretariat, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the European Investment Bank, Poland's National Fund for Environment Protection and Water Management, and the College of Europe. Together with our Secretariat, they have been an important part in our initiative and the design and planning of this annual meeting. It is great to have you here today and to see many representatives of the Western Balkans and Ukraine, as I have just seen in the slide. And you have been all very active in the clean energy transition and ensuring that the clean energy transition needs to happen in a fair and just way in the European Union and also in all the neighborhood countries. The just transition is a key pillar of the European Green Deal. The blueprint for the EU economic policy since 2019, but our commitment to leave no one behind and decarbonize our economy started even before. Since 2018, the coal regions in the economy in transition initiative support the EU coal, lignite, peat, and oil shale regions in their journey to phase out fossil fuels. Every region, whether in the European Union or in the neighborhood countries, had his own specificities, but share the need for collaboration and stakeholders' investment. For this reason, the Coal Region in Transition Initiative supports administrations and other relevant stakeholders via knowledge products, but also technical assistance, events, and peer-to-peer exchange. We have soon realized in the European Union that our neighborhood could also benefit from this kind of support. And therefore, in 2020, we launched the Initiative for Coal Regions in Transition in the Western Balkans and Ukraine. And we have ensured synergies and exchange between the two initiatives and between the concerned regions. Interacting and learning from each other are key for identifying the effective transition solutions and also to accelerate the coal phase-out in Europe. This is especially needed in this post-energy crisis context. Russia's deliberate and unprovoked aggression of Ukraine has shown us that we need to speed up transition and reshape our energy systems in order to overcome dependencies and improve the sustainability of our economic system. The crisis brought the risk of a potential comeback of coal in the European Union, but we can very proudly say that despite the fact that some coal units were reopened and put in emergency operation, this comeback of coal did not materialize. On the contrary, last winter, coal power in the European Union fell by 11%. That means 27 terawatt hour less, and also gas by 13%, which means minus 38 terawatt hour compared to the previous winter. At the same time, the share of renewables in the European Union drastically improved, and we are very proud of this figure that I want to share with you. 16 gigawatt of new wind capacity and 41 gigawatt of new solar capacity were installed in the European Union. This means an increase of 45% and 47% respectively, compared also to the previous year. In May this year, almost a third of the EU's electricity was generated from wind and solar, so it's 31%, which means 59 terawatt hour, while fossil fuels generated a record of 27%, which is 53 terawatt. I think that these figures show that we are on the right track, but in order to achieve our ambitious climate and target by 2030, we need to increase our decarbonization effort in every economic sector, including heating and cooling, buildings, industry, and transport. I think that this effort is particularly relevant. We are very few days from the COP28, and I think that we all together need to achieve some target that I will flag later on. The cooperation between the European Union, the Western Balkans, and Ukraine is therefore essential to fulfill our goals. We are equal partners in delivering the European Green Deal, as also shown by the Declaration on Energy Security and Green Transition in the Western Balkans that was adopted in November the last year at the Berlin Summit. Last October, the 10th Berlin Process Summit took place for the very first time in a Western Balkan country, Albania. On that occasion, the 6 Western Balkans countries welcomed the growth plan announced in May 23 this year and committed to advance regional integration, including on energy. Many topics were discussed, and all topics are relevant for a just transition, such as the potential of the value chain partnership between the European Union and the Western Balkans. This gives a strategic value to the region, and in particular in the context of the critical raw material and batteries. We want to prioritize investment in research, innovation, and sustainable mining practices. The proposal of the European Commission in this sense, the Energy Community, adopted the 2030 energy and climate target in December the last year. An effort to achieve this target by increasing the energy efficiency and also tapping into the renewable energy potential will significantly contribute to reduce the dependence from the imported energy sources in the European Union. In fact, the Western Balkans and Ukraine have a huge solar, wind, and hydropower energy potential. Competitive and well-functioning energy markets are key in this regard. And in most countries, the phasing out of coal will need to accelerate. The adoption of the very ambitious national energy and climate plans in the Western Balkans and Ukraine will also constitute the main vehicle to achieve the 2030 target, and also to further enable market reforms that are needed to achieve the mentioned target. It is key that all stakeholders are involved and that the plans focus on energy security and also the identification of key energy projects for the transition. In particular, I want to give you the example of the Ukrainian NECP, National Energy and Climate Plan, that will serve as a blueprint of the green reconstruction in Ukraine. And this is very much in line with the Green Deal, the EU accession process, and the European Union values. I would also like to recall one of the main achievements of the Western Balkans under the framework of the Energy Community, that is the adoption of the electricity market integration package that will also enable the full integration of the contracting parties' electricity market into the European Union internal electricity market. As you probably all know, this is the last event under the current Coal Regions in Transition Initiative, but I can assure you that will not be the last event supported by the European Commission on just transition. Fairness is a central element for the success of any transition. The European Commission will continue to support this transition in the Western Balkans and in Ukraine. As recalled by the President of the Commission in her latest speech of the State of the Union, the future of the Western Balkans in the European Union and is a window of opportunity and has opened for the accession path of the Western Balkans with the adoption of the very recently adoption of the 2023 enlargement package. The economic and the investment plan and the new growth plan announced this month will support progress in the reform process and regional economic integration within the European Union. Just transition will be a central cross-cutting element in this process. The Commission will also continue supporting the region in its decarbonization pathway and energy transition. A perfect example is the newly adopted new growth plan for the Western Balkans with €6 billion for the reform and growth facility proposed for the period 2024-2027. We are convinced that this will contribute to accelerate fundamental reforms and to accelerate socio-economic convergence. The European Union will continue providing support to Ukraine. With the latest payment in the last October, the European Union's overall support to Ukraine amounts to almost 83 billion. And in addition, the European Commission proposed up to 50 billion euro for the following years until 2027. Continuing the cooperation between the European Union and the Western Balkans and Ukraine is essential for a prosperous common future. Now, more than ever, the transition cannot succeed unless it is fair and just, leaving no region, industry, worker, or community behind. This annual meeting is another step towards the right direction. I am therefore looking forward to the intervention of all the speakers, who I personally want to thank for accepting our invitation and share with us their expertise, their experiences, and to contribute to make this debate even more rich. I would like to wish you a very fruitful discussion, and thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Cristina, for setting the context for what we're about to discuss so succinctly and with insight. As you said, the challenges are not just about phasing out coal and carbon-intensive activity, but also phasing in new technologies, both a challenge and an opportunity. But there is, as you pointed out, a need for acceleration. I also thought, as your speech mentioned on a number of occasions, there have been many notable policy developments, and many policy developments are now underway that will shape just transition in the Western Balkans and Ukraine, and such as the national energy and climate plans. And I know we'll be hearing more about them soon. So over the next day and a half, we will consider and discuss how cooperation, support and learning can further enable a fair and just transition in the Western Balkans and Ukraine, and how such cooperation, support and learning can actually accelerate the process. So the initiative has achieved much, and we can now look back at the last 3 years and take stock about what has been achieved, but we should also be looking towards the future. Therefore, there are several objectives for this meeting, effectively 3 objectives for this meeting. Firstly, we want stakeholders, you in the room and those online, to exchange perspectives and insights about the process and the progress of just transition and coal phase out over the last 3 years. To that end, we want you, the delegates, to ask questions, provide inputs, and not only to provide inputs and commentary during the sessions, but to network during the coffee breaks, the lunches, and this evening's drinks reception, which follows immediately afterwards. Secondly, we obviously want delegates to learn about current approaches and that the support is available from the 7 partners, the 7 principal partners. And for the delegates, for you to share your thoughts on what further support is needed to create a just transition at the regional and local levels. Finally, the third objective is we want to exchange good practice, but also consider what hasn't perhaps worked as successfully as anticipated. So, to plan the future, we need to consider what we do more of, what we do less of, and what we do differently. So, to deliver these 3 objectives over the next day and a half, we've developed an agenda based around key topics and issues that will prove a focus for our time together as a community over the next day and a half. So the first part of the agenda is looking at just transition as a building block in the process of transformation. And in that session, we will be hearing a range of voices, notable voices from across the Balkans and the Ukraine on how just transition is vital in a wider context of transformation and the impact it has on respective societies and economies. And as I mentioned earlier, we probably will be using the National Energy and Climate Plans as one of the policy lenses to which we consider that question. After this afternoon's coffee break, we will hear from the 7 principal organisations behind the initiative to gain their perspectives over the last 3 years. What have been the milestones? What have been the achievements? What have been the challenges? And what are the lessons for the future? And as I said earlier, we will conclude today at 6 o'clock with networking drinks. So please stay behind because networking is an important part of this event and it proved incredibly successful last year. Tomorrow is another day. So oops. There we go. Somebody's clicking while I'm clicking. I'll have a go. Okay, you have a go. There we go. Tomorrow is another day. We will be considering topics relating to the peer exchanges. As you know, over the last 12 months, these have proven to be incredibly successful with 8 peer exchange partnerships being created. We will also consider governance and stakeholder engagement, a key dimension of just transition, the financing of a just transition, and its role in the process of coal phase-out. And we'll finally consider how we improve capacity building. What are the needs of just transition actors on the ground, and how can they be supported? All the panels over the next day and a half are made up of experts on their respective topics, and will be moderated by representatives of the initiative's partner organisations. So this really is an opportunity for you to engage, listen, and give your thoughts on what has worked well and what the future may hold. So, on that note, I would now like to hand over to the first panel of the afternoon that is going to be ably moderated by Monica from the energy community. And I hand over to Monica at this stage and her panel. So, one last round of applause, please, for our keynote speaker. Thank you. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're ready for an exciting rest of the day. I would like to invite all our panelists of this panel to please take a seat. And I think we'll start off with Adam Cwetsch from the Energy Community Secretariat to give us a brief overview of the topic and a short deep dive. We'll follow up with our panelists. So if you just give us a few minutes, I would like to welcome everyone on stage, please.
Okay, so good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear friends of Co-Regions in Transition. My name is Cwetsch. I'm head of European Green Deal Unit in Energy Community Secretariat. It's indeed a pleasure to open the first panel of today. And I would very much like to follow the train of thoughts set by Cristina and zoom in a bit in a policy framework and legal tools that we have in the region that facilitate the process and that are very important to all the necessary activities which are ongoing. So let me maybe start from acknowledging the fact that we're almost 4 years after the publishing of the European Green Deal by the European Commission. And this communication, apart from all the different paradigm shifts which are embraced under the European Green Deal, stresses a very important link between the European Green Deal and the European neighborhood. And it is very much recognized in the document that European Green Deal cannot be achieved without the action taken by the European neighboring countries, without the effective action, in fact. And it is also stressed in the communication that the crucial component of the European Green Deal is just a transition. And looking back 4 years ago, we kind of think very much bridged it to the very important momentum that the region has ahead, political momentum concerning the new impetus for the enlargement. And now go into the first slide. And I think indeed it already became evident that there is not a question of if green transformation is needed, it's more the question of how, what kind of tools should be used to do it effectively. And despite, I think we can say that, despite turbulent years, we might quite straight say that the one very important conclusion is that the direction of the change was kept, even though, of course, that certain perspective has changed, given the COVID, given the energy crisis, and given the war that is ongoing in our biggest partner. And if we recall the last year's discussion, we had the very first panel, indeed, discussing whether the crisis will actually whether the crisis will put in danger our efforts. And we can say after 1 year that this was not entirely true, that we maintained the pathway forward decarbonization, of course with key challenges. Modernization challenge, which is at the same time opportunity of knowing that the decarbonization is very much the answer to security of supply issues, to resilience issues which are in the region. Another very important element I mentioned already, the EU accession impetus is key for pushing forward the green transition and the dialogue about it. More than ever, it is important to align with the EU rules so as to implement the key legislation and put the direction of our partners towards the EU. And finally, I could also here distinguish a very concrete driver for necessary decisions that have to be taken in the region, which is carbon border adjustment mechanism regulation, which puts certain deadlines for making key decisions in the region, for example, concerning the carbon pricing to be introduced. So what is the recipe of the green transition? Generally speaking, of course, given also that this is a domain of my institution, we'll focus on legislation and implementation of key pieces of legislation. We have political commitments in place. We have countries agreed to decarbonization milestones under the Green Agenda for Western Balkans, or the decarbonization roadmap. But we have also much more tangible instruments. The targets which are in line with the EU methodology of setting the targets, and we have targets for 2030 for climate and energy, for renewable energy in the energy mix and energy efficiency. We have also the enabling framework for the transition, which is the creation of the markets. I mean, this is probably one of the most immediate priorities for us to complete the integration of electricity markets when it comes to regulation, when it comes to enabling framework, so as to complete it with the decarbonization. And of course, the second key component of what we need for the green transformation is how to make it inclusive and how to make it just. Just transition, of course, is a concept which has a lot of colors, a lot of shades. It's not easy to define exactly, to limit just transition. But of course, one important element that we can stress is the process of ownership and inclusivity of not only governments, but ordinary citizens, in fact, civil society, institutions in the process. And European Green Deal has created certain tools which are binding in the EU, and we want to follow up with that and have it also in energy community. This governance is about proper planning and proper accountability framework for the policies and measures which are covered by these plans. These plans are national energy and climate plans, mentioned already in the introduction before, and we are now in the process of assessing those plans which were submitted to the Energy Community Secretariat. Some countries are still lagging behind with that, but we can say that now we are going to enter into the stage of providing recommendations to respective members, partners, and based on these recommendations, to also see where are the gaps and where are those gaps which are relevant for the process of ensuring that the transition is, in fact, just. The next slide. Voila. Okay, so the next slide, in fact, shows you how we see the very close link between the process of national energy and climate planning and the just transition. So when governance, when stakeholders in the respective countries are setting the list of policies and measures in order to achieve the targets which they are obliged to fulfill, one of the most important things is that there should be an impact assessment of those policies and measures in light of whether they actually fulfill the just transition tasks. So this is the assessment that has to be done at the level of governments first, and that would be a very important part of also our recommendations, and which should be then contributing to the finally adopted national energy and climate plans. You could see already a very quick overview of from which countries we have received the draft national energy climate plans so far, and that is important to stress once again that one of the criteria against which the assessment of the coherence and credibility of national energy and climate plans is going to be assessed is whether they actually ensure the proper inclusivity in the process, and I think we'll be discussing about it and having a couple of reflections in a few minutes. Another important aspect is, of course, exceptional and extraordinary situation that our biggest member is in. War ongoing in Ukraine, and despite that, we can say that European model of governance based on the proper planning is being used for actually anchoring the process of green transition, the process of green recovery and transition in Ukraine with the EU template, with the EU legislation. This is ongoing, and this is a tool that is being used by within the discussion dialogue of all the global donors on how to ensure that there is a certain consensus of where the biggest support should go, so as it is actually linked with long-term objectives. And Ukraine is working on the draft national energy climate plan as we speak. And what is the essence of also our contribution of this initiative to this process is that the voice of the core regions, the voice of more local partners is being heard in that process of planning the mid and long-term strategy for Ukraine and ensuring that it's being fully coherent. So here I will conclude with just an example of challenges which are obviously enormous ahead of us. I mentioned already CBAM, but CBAM might be more broadly carbon pricing. So what is missing in the region and will be soon or have to be decided by our partners on which way to follow is indeed how to ensure that polluter pays principle is actually executed. And this can have a very important link also when it comes to generating new revenues which can be used, leveraged with existing support mechanisms, also with potential future support mechanism to the core regions, in a way mirroring what EU member states went through, meaning mirroring a bit the cohesion policy, regional policy instruments in the EU. Another very important challenge is that this way towards green transition, equitable, just transition should not be top-down, should be bottom-up process with the local and regional institutions, governments taking into account, brought into the discussion. And finally, what is, I think, maybe even a very starting point of how to ensure that we are all on the same page is the process of ensuring that there is a certain degree of awareness and ownership among, again, ordinary citizens, what actually just transition is about, what it can deliver, what kind of benefits it can deliver, and what kind of myths should be debunked. And I hope that this meeting will also contribute to that. And I will stop here and leaving the floor to Monica, and I wish you a productive and interesting discussion.
Great, thanks, Adam. And thanks for setting the scene. And actually reminding us that just transition doesn't occur in a policy vacuum. We have documents, we have strategies, we have plans that give just transition shape and actually guide it and act as a roadmap. So this panel very much is going to be focused on that. How is just transition being shaped in policies on national levels? So without due delay, I'm going to introduce, with great excitement, the panel here, sitting actually around me. We're in a quite cozy setting here, but we have a very diverse set of voices, which is good, because it also shows the complexity of just transition, that you have to hear points of view coming from various stakeholders. So starting with my good friend Viktor, who has grilled me during the Energy Community Just Transition Forum. Thank you for the bravery for that. So Viktor Berishaj, CAN Europe, Western Balkans Climate and Energy Policy Coordinator, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. Right next to him, Branka, Knežević from a very long ministry. I always have to read it patiently. Ministry of Foreign Trade and Economic Relations of Bosnia and Herzegovina, head of Department of Primary Energy and Policy. Nice to have you here, Branka. And I have the honor to have next to me Leonita Shabani-Mullarama. I really hope I got that right, because you're the acting Secretary General of the Ministry of Economy. So a great pleasure to have you here. And I have next to me Aneta Kankaraš, right? Okay. Office for Sustainable Development, Head of Office in Montenegro. So another voice from the region. We unfortunately were not able to make connection today with Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine, Mr. Oleksii Sobolev. Due to air raid, he was unable to connect, but we did have a space for him, and regretfully we will not have him in the panel today. However, we have one more prominent speaker with here, Nikos Mantzaris. I hope that was close enough, at least, close enough, from the Green Tank in Greece, to show us a bit of a different flavor to just transition of an EU member state. So if I can just have one big round of applause for our panelists, just to give them encouragement. And I have two surprises for you. One I'm going to give you at the beginning, but the other one I'm going to save until the very end. But before we take a deep dive and actually go to one of my surprises, I think I'm going to ask my neighbor, the Secretary General, just to give us a few words on what is happening in just transition in Kosovo. So what's the Kosovo just transition story? If you can just enlighten us, please.
Well, Monica, thank you so much for this invitation and giving us the possibility to be present here today. Dear members of the energy community, Secretariat, dear partners, dear representatives of the European Commission and other guests. I see also representatives from the civil society organizations. Thank you for being with us today. I will start by saying that in Kosovo we face a unique set of circumstances that shape our energy sector. As a young country that thrives for economic development and growth, energy sector faces a number of challenges, but on the other side does have a great contribution to our economic development. For the past 60 years, coal has played an important role in our economy and society. We have the second largest reserve of exploitable lignite in Europe and fifth largest in the world. On the other side, our energy system is conventional, but we're trying to move forward with our strategy. More than 90% of our electricity is produced or is generated from burning coal, and only 279 megawatts are from renewable energy sources, which is unfortunate. And this is the reason that our government is committed to move forward with a just energy transition and specific measures to address the current situation in our country. Phasing out coal will be a multi-phase challenge for us. And we must ensure that no one is left behind in this sector transformation. That transition is socially just, and the most vulnerable groups, in this case, coal-related workers and companies, are not affected negatively. Without continuing to discuss on the energy crisis and its impact in our society and economy in general, I would like to focus in our strategic orientations and the policies that are shaping our future in the sector. Government of Kosovo is committed to undertake all the measures that are needed to strengthen our energy security, and this includes efforts to speed up the deployment of renewable energy sources and also invest in energy efficiency. But not only, we are planning and budgeting continuously investments in grid infrastructure and also district heating system based on renewables. We are not letting those crises slow down our progress, which is quite important. We are using this situation as a new chapter for Kosovo, and we have a new approach towards the development of a more efficient, sustainable, and clean energy system. This is why we have undertaken the important task of developing our national energy strategy that covers the period of 2022 until 2031, in line with Sofia Agreement and the Western Balkans Green Plan, gradually leading to carbon neutrality by 2050. Our strategy includes an increase in renewable capacities, investments in storage, regional market integration, investments in energy efficiency, measures and central district heating system, as I've mentioned before, based on renewable sources. We have set specific targets and very ambitious targets for 2031. We are planning to build 1,400 megawatts of wind and solar capacities to be introduced into the grid, with the help of 340 megawatts per hour of battery storage and advanced regional integration. We are planning to increase the renewable shares from 6.3% to 35% by 2031. We are also planning to reduce GHG emissions from the power sector by 32%. We plan to integrate our market with the European market by 2031, and also plan to invest more than 1 billion euros in energy efficiency measures to save up to 264 kiloton equivalent oil. So those are some specific actions and plans that we would like to address in the near future. However, we have to make sure and ensure the reliability and security of supply in general, while walking in the direction of EU with regard to climate policies and sustainability of the sector. As I have mentioned before, we have undertaken a number of measures and actions to accelerate this transition. In terms of the regional integration, we have functionalized the Albanian power exchange, which includes Kosovo and Albania, and we are planning to couple markets with North Macedonia and Greece as well. In terms of legislation, as a signatory party of the Energy Community Treaty, we are gradually harmonizing and aligning with EU acquis in the area of energy and also standards. And I'm happy and I can proudly say today that with regards to the transposition of the electricity package, we are proceeding at a fast pace. Additionally, I would like to inform you as well, we have just recently passed on the first reading the first ever law on renewables. And this is a quite success for our country and for the sector. In terms of storage project, Kosovo's biggest grant today in the sector, more than $200 million, will be invested for the battery storage, a grant that is financed through Millennium Challenge Corporation. And this will allow definitely the renewables integration into the system. Public and private investments are, let's say, a prerequisite for enabling our strategy happen and a successful implementation of the strategy. We plan to, let's say, have two concrete big projects in the sector. One of them is related to Kosovo's sole coal power plant, KEK, a public company that will soon diversify its portfolio with solar park that will be invested in an old coal mine, and this will add another 100 megawatts of energy production from renewable energy sources. Additionally, we are investing in a 50 megawatts solar heating project in the capital city of Kosovo, and this will be one of the Europe's largest, let's say, solar farms that will be beneficial to more than 60,000 citizens. Private investments are considered a key component of our strategy. One of the main pillars of the strategy is to accelerate renewables through wind and solar PV into the system. Kosovo plans to integrate more than 1,200 renewables over the next decade. And I can proudly say that we have launched the first ever pilot auction with a capacity of 100 megawatts that will be opened until the beginning of next year, 31st of January 2024. And in addition to this, we're planning to award other 630 megawatts to private companies that are interested to invest in the sector. In terms of energy efficiency, we are aiming to protect our citizens from price hikes. On the other side, also, we are planning to ensure that there are incentives for them to increase energy efficiency and reduce demand for energy. Last year, we rolled out the first ever energy efficiency scheme in the residential sector that benefited more than 9,000 citizens with an amount of 5 million euros. We are replicating this scheme even today. The process is ongoing, and we plan to achieve 30 million investments in the sector, and also to reach, let's say, 20,000 citizens that will benefit from different, let's say, measures that will be subsidized from the funds through house installation of solar panels, purchase of efficient heating appliances, etc. And just last week, we have launched the first energy efficiency subsidy scheme for micro, small, and medium enterprises. So to conclude my, let's say, opening remarks, I would like to confirm that building the capacities of renewable energy sources is one of the key factors that contributes to economic development, while keeping prices affordable for our citizens and businesses. We do understand that the security of supply and affordable prices are one of the factors that are quite interesting for, let's say, foreign investors, but domestic investors as well, who would like to extend their business operations in Kosovo, but also this does contribute in our economic development, job creation, and also provides opportunities for local companies in every segment of their value chain. The energy transition is a global challenge that requires cooperation and collaboration between countries through sharing different practices, technologies, but also actions and frameworks that facilitate the energy transition. But let us not forget that the underlying truth of the phase-out process of coal and acceleration of this green transition comes at a price. And as a nation that faces energy poverty of 40%, having a lower GDP per capita and having a small economy in comparison to developed countries, we recognize that passing costs of this transaction onto our citizens is simply unfeasible. That's why we need commitment, we need support from our partners, and we are committed definitely to follow all the obligations that derive from the treaty on one side, but on the other side, our aim is to become a member of the European Union. We need support in promoting renewable energy sources, investing in energy efficiency measures and technologies, grid infrastructure, and other areas that are necessary to achieve this vision. We believe that a just transition can only be achieved through working together, and this transition opens up new opportunities for regional and international cooperation. And we look forward to further support from our partners to help Kosovo develop a more efficient, sustainable, and clean energy system. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Secretary General. I think you're a busy woman then, from what you have told us. It's so interesting because from all the things I noted down, I actually noticed that they're extremes. On one hand, you said you have the 5th biggest coal reserves in the world, and then you're saying you have a 2050 climate neutrality target, and you're going to have Europe's biggest solar farm, solar park. So it's a bit of a challenge. I have good news. I have just learned that the Deputy Minister of Ukraine has been able to connect. So before we lose him, I think I would like to take the chance and jump on to his presence online. I don't know if we can get a connection to him. Minister, are you with us? Let's maybe just give him a moment.
Yeah, does it work? It should work. Yeah.
Oh, I think we can hear you. If I can just take this opportunity and ask you basically one question before any chance that you disconnect. So Ukraine, despite the war that we're actually even to some extent experiencing now during this event, since you are not able to connect, is actually you're working on your NECP. So work is ongoing. You are thinking ahead. You're creating the future plans for energy and climate, and you're planning to build back green. So my question is this one. The situation of the coal regions will remain one of the main challenges. because of this whole context that I just mentioned. So how do you intend to address the elements of just transition in Ukraine and ECP? If you could just shed briefly some light on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this question. This is exactly
We cannot hear you. Is it possible for you to speak louder or increase the microphone?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Good. So this is exactly why what we wanted to talk about today. So first of all, thank you for DG ENER for this initiative and for opportunity to join today virtually. Yeah, there are some issues with that, but then still like we need to work and overcome everything as Ukrainians and as Europeans. So we still rely as a country on coal-based generation and supply. So we use coal for generating electricity and for heating, and it still provides, the whole sector provides jobs for thousands of Ukrainians in Ukraine right now. And we rely heavily on coal during this winter, where Russians actually attack our heating system and our electricity system. And we will be, even when we rebuild grid, we will need some coal to balance out the system as we understand it. But this is a tricky situation that we also should be incorporating into National Energy and Climate Plan, because the system will not balance itself without coal yet. But then Ukraine is ensuring that there's going to be a coal phase out within the next decades. So in 2021, Ukrainian government has already announced its plans to fully replace coal with other types of generation by 2035 and join the Powering Past Coal Alliance. We just recently have approved the 2050 energy strategy, and it also mentions phasing out coal for use of electricity production by 2035. So we continue to meet these commitments. And also not just the government, but private companies, they incorporate into their own plans to developing the coal exit strategies, and municipalities as well. So we'll need to take into account in the NECP this coal phase out, and we need to develop new sources of electricity and heat to replace coal. We will focus not only on solar, wind, and other technologies of power generation, but also nuclear, including such new technologies as small modular reactors. And we already have made good progress on NECP preparation, so it should be ready by June next year, but we're developing it in very fast pace because it needs to be aligned with all the other strategic documents that we are preparing or have already committed to, like Ukraine plan or energy strategy. So we have synchronized draft NECP parameters with energy strategy already, and developing this same with the Ukraine plan. And the main modeling elements were discussed with stakeholders, donors, experts, and international organizations. And as envisaged by EU regulations, the NECP draft will go through public consultation process. So we start public consultations this week, and we encourage everyone to participate in them virtually if interested. This whole green transition of Ukraine, we think, is not just a right thing to do, but is a big business opportunity for Ukraine to be not only a reliable supplier of green energy and green goods for Ukraine itself, but also for our neighbors in Europe. And we see, for example, such industries like green steel, or later hydrogen production, or biomethane that can come from agricultural production. So as a vital source for green energy for both Ukraine and Europe. And to sum up, I would like to emphasize the transition to a sustainable innovation economy not only is a necessity, but a strategic choice of Ukraine. So we're committed and we will deliver, and NECP is a tool to make this choice a reality. We understand that there needs to be a lot of work on basically producing the plan and then delivering on the plan, and a lot of finance, both from internal Ukrainian sources, but also from external. But then NECP is a very, very good starting point for that, and we encourage all our partners and stakeholders and interested parties to get into developing the best plan possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for this possibility to connect to us. It's really good to and encouraging to hear that the 2035 date is still on the table despite the very difficult circumstances for coal phase out. If possible, please try to join us for the rest of the discussion and the questions, but of course, if not possible, it is fully understandable. I'd like to move on then to actually the first one of my surprises for you. I would like you to, if possible, answer 2 questions on Slido. And we are going to do a little bit of fortune telling. First one, the first question is what is the key issue to be addressed in one word? If you just had to put it in one word to ensure a successful just transition. Price, wow. Equity, Then it's jobs. Okay, so in the end, it's not about the money. It is a much more complex topic. Yeah, jobs, oh. Okay, funds, people, employment, carbon pricing, capacity, wow. Actually, it's so interesting to see this diversity of needed elements. But jobs is winning. Okay, I'll give you 30 more seconds. Okay, so we have, I think, 2 clear winners from this round. The other question, if we can move on to, is what year will be coal phased out in the region of the coal regions in transition, which is Western Balkans and Ukraine? Fortune-telling exercise now. 2026, oh, I hope it's, yeah, there's cheap, I don't know, 250, whoa, not a lot of optimism in online or in person. Okay, okay. $250 is winning. So basically aligning it with climate neutrality. Okay, I'll give you 20 more seconds. But it's very interesting because actually we have 2, let's say, 1 big winner, 1 smaller winner, but they're so far apart that it's really going to happen quite soon or actually not so soon. Okay, so I'll actually nudge my panelists here. So what do you all think of these 2? Do you have any volunteers in your reflections that jobs came out before money for just transition? It was very interesting for me personally. And that most likely the whole region will be coal-free only in 2050. Is there maybe a volunteer to share? Or are you surprised? Go ahead, Viktor. Were you surprised? Or?
Is it on? Yes. Well, I just want to say, well, for the first question, it's a very diverse and complex issue. So I don't think that any one of those answers is actually less important than another one, because it actually has to deal with the participation, with the equity, with taking care of everyone, jobs, money, housing, resettlement, etc., businesses. All of those are actually part of the conversation. But I would maybe just stop on the 2050, the second question, which kind of indicates, I mean, it's very important to have a decarbonization target. And for now, under the Sofia Declaration of the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans, we have the 2050. But I am now talking only about the region of the Western Balkans. It's very easy to commit something in 2050. and not so easy to commit to a much higher ambition in 2030, 2035, 2040, because it means that we need to do a lot of job now. And this is actually, if we delay it by 2050, we are going to pay a much heftier price. But I will stop discussion and not comment on the before, but this is just my take.
Thanks, Viktor. And indeed, I think you actually bring us into the discussion now. Okay, 2050 is too far away, so let's talk about the clue theme of this panel, the main documents that are driving this transition, which have a shorter time frame horizon, because you might have guessed that the clue is here, NECPs. And maybe I'll address the first question to you, Branka, because Bosnia and Herzegovina has submitted its draft NECP. And from your experience, actually, because as Viktor said, 250 is too long. This is a document for 10 years. So what would you say were the biggest challenges in incorporating just transition in the NECP, taking that it's fully incorporated into the document? And what are the solutions to those problems? So how difficult it is to get it in, but also what are the ways forward in trying to resolve these issues? If you could shed some light. It can be on Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also can be wider for countries that are experiencing the whole NECP exercise. It's not an easy one. It has all sectors in there. So please go ahead, Branka.
Hvala za vaše pitanje. Prije svega...
yes, please, for translation.
I will wait. Hvala za vaše pitanje. Prije svega željela bih pozdraviti sve učesnike današnjeg događaja i zahvaliti se organizatorima na pozivu za učešće u panelu. I zaista mi je zadovoljstvo da imam priliku podijeliti naše iskustvo koje se odnosi na razvoj integrisanog energetskog i klimatskog plana Bosne i Hercegovine. Ono što bih odmah na početku istakla je samo vođenje procesa. Proces vodi Ministarstvo spoljne trgovine i ekonomskih odnosa Bosne i Hercegovine u saradnji sa entitetskim ministarstvima nadležnim za energetiku i zaštitu okoline i Brčko distriktom. Ono što je značajno također istaći da je u pitanju jako kompleksan i zahtjevan proces, jer po prvi put primjenjujemo integrisani pristup u planiranju energetskog sektora uvažavajući klimatske ciljeve. U ovom dokumentu imamo definisane ciljeve koji nam daju dalji razvoj, naš plan daljeg razvoja energetskog sektora. U pitanju je znači ciljevi koji se odnose na smanjenje emisija gasova sa efektom staklene bašte, zatim povećanje udjela obnovljivih izvora energije, kao i mjere za povećanje energetske efikasnosti. Također, dokument sadrži politike i mjere koje je potrebno preduzeti da bismo ispunili ove ciljeve. Za svaku od 5 dimenzija energetske unije, tu podrazumijevamo dekarbonizaciju, koja uključuje smanjenje emisija sa efektom staklene bašte i ciljeve udjela obnovljivih izvora energije, zatim energetsku efikasnost, energetsku sigurnost, unutrašnje energetsko tržište i 5. dimenzije koja se odnosi na istraživanje, inovacije i konkurentnost. Također želim pomenuti da dokument sadrži i indikatore koji omogućavaju praćenje implementacije pomenutih mjera u daljem periodu. Znači, dokument se odnosi na 2030. godinu sa projekcijama za 2050. godinu. Također želim pomenuti da će ovaj dokument zamijeniti akcione planove koji se odnose na energetsku efikasnost i obnovljive izvore energije i povezati ih sa praćenjem emisija gasova sa efektom staklene bašte I ovo predstavlja planski, multisektorski okvir koji omogućava borbu protiv klimatskih promjena. Dokument energetski i klimatski plan Bosne i Hercegovine pripremljen je u skladu sa rokovima koji su dati u energetskoj zajednici. Dokument je dostavljen Sekretarijatu energetske zajednice na komentare i sugestije u junu mjesecu ove godine. Također, u julu mjesecu održane su javne rasprave u 3 grada Bosne i Hercegovine, Banja Luka, Mostar, Sarajevo. Nakon toga su prikupljeni i pisani komentari. Dokument je objavljen na web stranici Ministarstva spoljne trgovine i ekonomskih odnosa Bosne i Hercegovine u dijelu web stranice posvećene energetici. Također, nakon toga, u skladu sa procedurom donošenja propisa u Bosni i Hercegovini, nacrt dokumenta je postavljen i na javne konsultacije na e-platformi koja se zove e-konsultacije Ministarstva pravde Bosne i Hercegovine. Također, pripremljena je i strateška procjena uticaja propisa dokumenta koja je također bila na platformi konsultacije Ministarstva pravde Bosne i Hercegovine i dalji planovi vezani za dokument su da u idućoj godini u skladu sa rokovima nakon uvaženih komentara i sugestija koje smo dobili u međuvremenu taj dokument dostavimo u planiranom roku. Kao što ste mogli čuti u uvodnoj prezentaciji koju nam je Adam održao, rok je iduće godine, juni mjesec, da se dostavi dokument Sekretarijatu energetske zajednice, a također znači u idućoj godini je i planirano usvajanje ovog dokumenta. Ono što također želim reći, da i u ovoj sali vidim lica koja su svojim radom doprinijela radom u radnim grupama, tematskim radnim grupama, da ovaj dokument bude kvalitetniji. Hvala im još jednom.
Thanks, Branka. There's a lot of enthusiasm for this topic in the room, which is great. You touched on a very important aspect that I think actually Adam also highlighted, the issue of public consultations, because these documents should really have national ownership and they should be consulted as extensively as possible, which goes without saying also for just transition. And I think following up with this, I would like to ask you, Secretary General, a similar question, because you also submitted as Kosovo a draft NECP, and you did do a series, I think, of 4 workshops for consulting on the document. And I know that you're planning even more of those workshops for the final NECP. So what is your take on the feedback that you're getting so far from these consultations, and how you basically as a government do you plan to take forward the results of these consultations?
Thank you for the question. As my colleague from Bosnia and Herzegovina has mentioned, the whole process in terms of legal requirements and procedural requirements, Kosovo does have more or less the same experience. As a government, since the very beginning of drafting this very important document, public consultations haven't been just a procedural requirement, as I've mentioned before. Rather, they have been a necessity for us to engage with a number of stakeholders that are active in the sector. And we did receive enormous contribution from, let's say, public institution representatives, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Education, Ministry that is responsible for trade and industry, but also from civil society representatives who did participate directly into the working group that was established between 2 key leading institutions, a Ministry of Economy and also ministry that is responsible for environment and infrastructure. We have to confirm that there was discussion, there were let's say, different views on different topics, as a number of dimensions were discussed, starting from decarbonization, let's say, to research, innovation, and competitiveness. So each of those dimensions reflects our dedication to a comprehensive and forward-thinking policies. And this, let's say, contribution that we have received did contribute to inclusive policy making, as we are aiming to have in our, let's say, policy making processes. The draft, as you have already confirmed, was shared with the Energy Community Secretariat, and we have received all the comments and responses from the Secretariat, very valuable ones. And after this process, we are planning to continue with the next rounds of consultations in 7 big or the largest municipalities of Kosovo, same as we did with the National Energy Strategy, and that actually brought a lot of inputs into the document, especially, let's say, from business associations, civil society organizations, media, experts in the sector, etc. So I think that this approach definitely brings better documents, more implementable, and we together contribute in, let's say, achieving this vision that we have until 2050. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And maybe then, Aneta, will zoom into Montenegro. You have a study, I think it was conducted by UNDP and Slovak Aid, on the socioeconomic impacts of Plevlja, which is the area in Montenegro that has the thermal power plant. And how will the results of this study fit into the Montenegrin ACP? What are your plans to take the results on board?
Hvala na pitanju. Prije svega dozvolite mi da se na početku zahvalim na pozivu i učešću na ovom godišnjem događaju Sekretarijata inicijative za regione uglja Zapadnog Balkana u tranziciji i Ukrajini. Svakako, zadovoljstvo mi što je Kancelarija za održivi razvoj prepoznata kao jedan od sagovornika na temu pravedne tranzicije. Također, ovom prilikom, s obzirom da ste već pomenuli, bih se zahvalila i UNDP u Crnoj Gori, koji predano daje podršku Kancelariji za održivi razvoj, ne samo kada je tema pravedne tranzicije u pitanju, već i druge razvojne oblasti, pa tako su nas i podržali u izradi mape puta za pravednu tranziciju, koja bi trebalo da bude završena do kraja ove godine, uz svakako podršku vlade Slovačke, koja je dala finansijsku podršku za ovaj projekat. Kao što ste rekli, na početku, znači, morali smo identifikovati stanje u regionu uglja Pljevlja u Crnoj Gori, koji je jedini region uglja u Crnoj Gori i od koga itekako naš energetski sistem zavisi, tako da smo napravili jednu opsežnu dijagnostiku stanja, to jest socioekonomsku analizu, i koja predstavlja jednu polaznu osnovu za prepoznavanje i rješavanje izazova u procesu postepenog smanjivanja upotrebe uglja u Crnoj Gori, a sve na principima pravedne tranzicije. Ono što je jako značajno jeste da ta dijagnostika ili dijagnostika samog stanja u regionu uglja Pljevlja sadrži informacije koje su prikupljene i na primarnom i na sekundarnom nivou. Znači, koristili smo podatke od relevantnih institucija u Crnoj Gori, ali svakako i inpute sa konsultacija direktno zaposlenih ljudi u lancu uglja za region Pljevlja. Tu su bili predstavnici sindikalnih organizacija, radnika, lokalne uprave, privrednici, opštinsko rukovodstvo i svakako nevladin sektor. I za potrebe same analize radili smo istraživanje među zaposlenim, ali isto tako i diskusije, žive diskusije i fokus grupe sa zaposlenim u termoelektrani Pljevlja i rudniku uglja i mogu vam reći da ja mislim da je to jedna od najvećih vrijednosti samog ovog dokumenta, jer su upravo oni koji su direktno uključeni u sami lanac proizvodnje električne energije od uglja dali značajan doprinos kako to Crnu Goru vide u buduće u kontekstu pravedne tranzicije i postepenog napuštanja upotrebe uglja. Cilj ove analize bio je da se kroz jednu prizmu budućeg razvoja ovog regiona i Crne Gore prikupe relevantni podaci o trenutnom stanju i potrebama prije svega lokalnog stanovništva, biznis zajednice i svih važnih aktera u društvu koji socioekonomski zavise od lanca proizvodnje električne energije na bazi uglja. I mogu da kažem da je ova analiza, to jest dijagnostika regiona uglja Pljevlja pružila nam važne informacije koje će uticati na planiranje i sprovođenje buduće dekarbonizacije uzimajući u obzir ekonomske, socijalne i ekološke faktore. Ovaj dokument je ulazni dokument za izradu mape puta za pravednu tranziciju u Crnoj Gori. Oba dokumenta, znači dijagnostika i mapa puta koja je sad u fazi nacrta, su rađene uz široke konsultacije u Crnoj Gori. Mogu da kažem da smo na osnovu ovih projekata pokrenuli jedan veliki dijalog u Crnoj Gori i konačno pokušali da napravimo jedan ambijent u kom nije teško izgovoriti da se Crna Gora nalazi u zelenoj tranziciji, u pravednoj tranziciji. Za to nam je poslužila jedna platforma Nacionalnog savjeta za održivi razvoj i njegove radne grupe za pravednu tranziciju. To je jedna platforma Dijalog za razvoj u okviru koje organizujemo sastanke sa svim zainteresovanim stranama i razne događaje i na kojima otvoreno, transparentno razgovaramo o ovoj temi. Tako da su inputi svih zainteresovanih strana, a ne kako smo se trudili, čini mi se, a to nas vodi i sama politika održivog razvoja koja nam je krovna, da nikog ne izostavimo iza sebe kada je ovaj proces u pitanju i da uključimo sve zainteresovane strane i sa svima jednako na istom nivou razgovaramo o ovoj temi. Iskreno se nadam da će oba ova dokumenta, kako dijagnostika, tako i mapa puta koja bi trebalo da bude gotova do kraja godine, poslužiti kao jedna dobra osnova i okvir za izradu samog nacionalnog energetskog klimatskog plana, čija izrada je u toku. Možda smo malo usporili sa tim dokumentom, nije da sad stajem u neku odbranu, ali prosto u Crnoj Gori u poslednje 3 godine se suočavamo sa velikim, da kažem, izazovima kako obezbijediti taj kontinuitet, da isti ljudi rade u istim radnim grupama i na istim poslovima, s obzirom na to da već imamo 3 godine za redom, 3. vladu za redom i onda nekako sve to usporava procese koji zavise od ljudi koji su zaposleni u javnom sektoru. Tako da bi, ja se iskreno nadam, trebalo da ispoštujemo rokove koji se odnose na izradu ovog dokumenta i da već do kraja juna naredne godine imamo gotov i spreman nacionalno-energetski klimatski plan kada je Crna Gora u pitanju. Hvala.
Thanks, Aneta. And it's so interesting because apart from the challenges of continuity, you have to have the challenge of consistency, because in the end, it's not only about NECPs, it's the additional studies, the action plans, roadmaps, and so on. In the end, it's important to make sure that they tell the same story on just transition. And that is also a challenge in itself. With that, I would like to turn to Nikos. I have not forgotten about you. I know you're sitting there quite alone, but I've saved you almost for dessert, as I still have Viktor. But looking at the Slido results and hearing all the input from contracting parties from the region, and having also the experience of Greece taking on just transition. So can you share with us some of the lessons learned from your side on just transition in Greece and moving away? How actually they developed the lignite regions in Greece, and what were the challenges there? And what were the broader consequences of phasing out lignite that were to some extent reflected in the Greek NECP? So if you could shed some Greek light to us. Yes, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Thank you very much, Monica. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to contribute to this dialogue on just transition in the Western Balkans. Hopefully it will evolve into some concrete planning for the citizens in coal regions in the Western Balkans. I'll start with the second part of your question about lignite phase out in Greece. I think Greece is a very good example that lignite phase out is feasible. It can happen, and can happen in a short period of time. If you look at it from September of 2019, when the phase-out decision was made, it was announced in New York, until September of 2023, if you look at the first 9 months of the year, lignite production has dropped almost by 60% in Greece. 2023 is definitely going to be a record low year for lignite. It will account for approximately 9% of electricity demand, whereas in the early 2010s it was almost or more than 50% of electricity demand. At the same time, renewables have soared. Right now, renewables, mainly wind and PV, and to a much lesser extent hydro, account for 50% of electricity demand. They cover more than half of electricity demand in Greece. And that's because of the progress made, especially during recent years. This is not going to change either. If you look at the draft NECP that we recently submitted to the European Commission, 2030, just 7 years from now, Greece is going to produce 82% of its electricity from renewables by doubling its renewables capacity in the next 7 years. Fossil gas is going to account for only 18% of production. That's the complementary part. And Greece is essentially going to nullify its dependence on neighboring countries for electricity imports. We used to be a very big net importer of electricity. It's going to become practically zero by 2030, the electricity that we're importing from Bulgaria and North Macedonia. Another very important element of the draft NECP on how to balance demand and production is energy storage. We're going to ramp up pump hydro energy storage. We're also going to ramp up batteries. We're talking about 5.3 gigawatts by 2030, just of these two things. And we're also going to develop hydrogen electrolyzers, green hydrogen electrolyzers at the time. So that's also a very big investment that Greece is planning on making. Therefore, the take-home message out of this is, besides feasibility, is that setting a date is very, very important. It seems to have functioned as a catalyst in the case of Greece, and it's also very important to enshrine it into official energy planning documents, such as 2 NECPs in Greece's case, 2019 and 2023, as well as the first Greek climate law that was voted in May 2022. Now, this energy transition that's already taking place in Greece would have been much easier and much cheaper if Greece did not make several mistakes in its energy policy during the last decade. The first one being that we built a new coal plant that was actually commissioned in 2023. There's no chance that there will be any return of the 1.5 billion euros investment, simply because this is going to cease its operation before 2028. That's the final date, although the draft NECP says that this might happen much earlier. It has a very explicit statement just on that. So that's a big mistake. The other mistake was the gradual increase on the dependence on fossil gas when it comes to electricity production, which was being increased throughout the decade up until 2021. As a result of this, Greece has paid almost 11 billion euros in subsidies of electricity bills during the 2021-2022 energy crisis, just to mitigate the negative impacts of this explosion in prices, which, as we all know, was due to the increase in fossil gas prices. This number would have been much larger if Greece did not deploy renewables at a record pace in 2022, but still it would have been much smaller if we started way earlier. So the lesson to be learned here is that Western Balkans should avoid the mistake that Greece made, and also several EU countries made, to rely on gas as a transition fuel. I think this theory of gas as transition fuel was virtually shattered during the energy crisis. And we see this also in the REPowerEU plan, which ramps up the reduction goals for fossil gas. Now, as far as just transition goes in lignite regions, Greece was very quick in the planning part. After the announcement was made in 2019, we developed very quickly a plan which had several sustainable features, very good features, I would say, and also secured funding for this process. Both EU funds, the EU Just Transition Fund, but also national funds from the EU ETS, public revenue that goes to Greece from the EU ETS. Of course, this should have taken place much earlier, because the writing was on the wall about the dead end of the lignite-based electricity model way before 2019. It should have started, planning should have started still when we had more jobs in the lignite industry, in parallel with the operation of lignite plants. But this did not happen. Still, it is remarkable how fast this was developed. As a result of this speed, Greece was the first EU member state to have the so-called territorial just transition plans approved. This is the official just transition planning document. It really replaces an ECP when it comes to just transition in EU countries. And also the first EU member state that started the implementation of the territorial plan last year. October of 2022 was the official kickoff. And so far, 42% of the funds have been mobilized. They have not been spent, of course, but because this takes time, but they have been mobilized with various programs. There is one very negative aspect in the just transition story in Greece, and that is participation, lack of participation. The planning phase, but also the implementation phase, do not include heavy participation from local communities and their representatives, and that's probably the biggest threat for success for just transition process in Greece. Therefore, really the lesson to be learned here is, when designing a just transition process for the Western Balkans, it should be made as participatory as possible. It's not a matter of luxury, it is really what guarantees success in this kind of a process. Early planning is also very important. We found that out in Greece as well. If we started earlier, the lignite regions will not have their backs against the wall with many job losses and very small time to make up for that with sustainable investments. And finally, there is the issue of funding. Funding should be available, should be dedicated. I cannot stress that enough. In Greece, we saw political movement, we saw progress when it comes to just transition once we had dedicated funding, even if that funding was not significant at the beginning, was just a national just transition fund. And to this end, carbon pricing policies in Western Balkans that will come as a result of CBAM could contribute in this direction in funding just transition in the Western Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikos. I think a few people will be turning to you for just transition checklist with all the elements that you provided, but public participation, I think, already resonated a few times here. Avoidance of carbon lock-ins for infrastructure, and that move of actually investing in fossil fuel infrastructure that may not pull through in the end. So thanks a lot. And Viktor, I think you're last speaker before we open up for questions, and before my last surprise for everyone here. Viktor, if you could close your eyes for me, please. Now imagine we're in the middle of 2024. The final NECPs are submitted. How is your dream version of just transition being incorporated in the final NECPs? You have the floor.
Can I open my eyes?
Yes.
This is, I think, a very, very hard question. And why is it hard? Because we need to take stock what we have in hand in the draft NECPs. and how much room for improvement do we actually have until the June. So we have 2 NECPs which were adopted, which need to be revised according to the new adopted legislation in the energy community, and I'm talking about Albanian and North Macedonian NECP. We have received 3 draft NECPs from the countries which we discussed today, so Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Serbia, and we still yet have to receive a draft NECP from Montenegro. I'm covering only the Western Balkans today. So what is actually in it? I'm very happy to announce to you all that today we've planned to actually honor this event and publish our assessment of the 3 draft NECPs which were presented during this summer and submitted to the Energy Community Secretariat. I don't have the thingy for the slides, but I just want to mention how we've approached the assessment of the NECPs, because this is the 2nd time in a row that we do this assessment, and we have identified it according to 5 thematic pillars, where we assess the energy and climate ambition, consistency, namely with the governance regulation and the national policies, and how actually that is in line with the fossil fuel subsidies phase out, the credibility, which relates to the policies and measures, finances, social and environmental aspects, transparency to actually assess the stakeholder engagement, and as well as the regional aspects. The link there is for the 2022 assessment of North Macedonian and Albanian NECP, but today, can we go to the, well, I have the thingy. So if you can take out your mobile phones, or whoever is online as well, you can actually click on this QR code, and it will lead you to actually a live page on our website, at Can Europe's website, so you can access the assessment report of the 3 draft NECPs. So we talked about these thematic pillars, which also imply what needs to be done until 2040 until 2024 June, in order to actually have address the principles of just transition and address the just transition in a useful way. And I would like to start from highlighting few key points or principles that we have 2030 energy and climate targets, which should serve as a stepping stone towards reaching climate neutrality. Current hook in the Western Balkans is the year 2050. That doesn't mean that we need to actually phase out coal by that date. We can, and what Nikos just said, we should do it much earlier because of the opportunities that actually provide us, and according to the landscape which is in the Western Balkans. 2, we need roadmaps, and this is where the NECPs have an amazing role, and that is to actually tell us the feasible scenarios to reach the 2030 energy and climate targets and how this reflects in the long run. We need very exact, cohesive, and quantifiable policies and measures to actually achieve the targets and actually in line with the roadmaps we see in the NECPs. Very much important is the engagement and collaboration, and I cannot highlight enough what Adam said earlier, and that is ownership of the process, because this is a process for the whole society. This is economy-wide plan. It's not only about energy, it's not only about industry, it actually has effect on all of the different spheres of the economy. Financing mechanisms, we can talk about that a lot, and of course monitoring and reporting and how we actually achieve these. So in order to actually to address just transition, we need to see if NECPs actually address these key principles. And while this, the next slide, this is more or less applying not exactly to all of the three draft NECPs, but there are some indications which actually have a common denominator. There is no new coal power plants in the Western Balkans, but we do not have a coal phase out. We see that the countries still plan to actually cling for a very long time to this very aged infrastructure and coal fleet, which very much brings into a question how actually we can make them work. We can, the medium age of all coal power plants in the Western Balkans is around 40 years. It means that some of them are 60, some of them are 35. So it's very important to actually acknowledge the problem of keeping alive that infrastructure, which actually means draining more investments into this obsolete technology and not allowing the market to move forward in a very natural direction based on competition and much lower cost of investment in and diversifying the energy mix. So there is no full consistency across the board on the 2030 targets adopted at the energy community. Let me be very clear, because the NECPs on the national level should reflect the 2030 targets adopted at the Energy Community Ministerial Council, which were negotiated and voted by the contracting parties themselves. And we actually do not see this. And when I talked about the 2050, it is a very interesting number. Only Bosnia and Herzegovina and NECP actually foresees climate neutrality by 2050, but I will talk about the problems with the Bosnian NECPs or what actually the missed opportunities are, but other countries actually do not foresee climate neutrality by 2050. Kosovo falls short, models only until 2040, while Serbia still, even until 2050, considers using coal of this same infrastructure for the next 30 years, which is amazing assumption for us to actually consider. What has been discussed today, and that is very clear and very important and very positive aspect of the NECPs, is the aggression and the highlight of the renewables. We need very much to emphasize this. This is a very positive step, but we need to actually accelerate and understand how to integrate much better these renewables. There is also a very important thing that what has energy crisis told us, and that we need to save a lot. And especially in the region where the energy efficiency can actually be considered as a low-hanging fruit, because there is a lot of room for improvement. So energy efficiency first principles should actually guide us into the amount of the energy that we are going to be needing in the primary and the final energy consumption. And there is a lot of improvement actually needed until the final NECP be adopted. So there are considerable amount of policies and measures. Some of them are very great, amazing, and very much help with the pathway to actually reaching the target. But many of them, and actually some of the key policies and measures, are generalized, are vague. We do not see tangible objectives. The indicators are there. To which extent, how do we actually measure them? Are the timelines actually in line with what is foreseen? These are very much things that we need to actually understand. And the public participation, while formally the public participation should have actually happened before the drafts were sent to the energy community, meaning the draft document of the NECPs should have gone to the public consultation. We should have seen an outcome of this consultation, and together with those outcomes actually send the documents to the Energy Community Secretariat for review and for the recommendation. Only Serbia had public consultations in the classical sense. We heard from Madam Knežević and from I'm sorry, I'm forgetting Leonita. Yeah, the Secretary General, that there has been consultations with the working groups and etc. But we need to actually put these documents to wider stakeholders for engagement and receiving feedback. And also for Serbia, we actually need to see the roadmap on how these comments are actually integrated. I am being very straightforward here and telling that just transition is just a phrase in the NECPs. This is not me being grilling, but actually me pleading for addressing the societal impacts and environmental impacts of the plans, which we actually do not see them, to understand how this affects jobs, what are the plans for the communities, what are the plans for businesses who actually associate with this, where is the education in all of this. These are all parameters which are missing from the draft NECPs. And I would like to just maybe highlight some of the findings. I am a bit of a geek with numbers. I like to see them. I like to model something, and I would like to kind of have a baseline against what I would like to assess something. And we've discussed in the recent years that we need kind of to understand what is, when we have a specific target on 2030 for greenhouse gas emission reduction, what does that mean? Is it high enough? Does that bring us to 2050? How do we account for the natural sinks, etc.? These are all the questions that actually are still yet to be answered. We try to answer them compared to 1990, which is an internationally accepted baseline for comparing the greenhouse gas emission reduction. The region has changed significantly, especially in the 1990s. Most of the countries actually do not come again to the level of emissions that were before the devastating wars in the region and different developments, which actually mean that today we have lower, today, when I say today, 2020, 2021, 2018, whatever the baseline of assessment is, we have much lower emissions than before. So we need to assess the amount of emission reduction based from today. It's very important baseline to set for us to know actually what we achieve by 2030. We've developed kind of a linear reduction model, which should be seen. It's not our official position, but this is kind of to put a baseline there to understand how do we actually assess the emission reduction. And this linear emission reduction means taking into account what LULUCF accounts for today and removing the rest of the emissions linearly from 2020 until 2050, meaning every 10 years the emissions compared to the baseline of 2020 should be lower by 33.33%. In this graph, it actually presents this, orange color, and we see that none of the countries actually achieve this ambition, because these are the amount of greenhouse gases in 2030, while the blue one tells us how much greenhouse gas emissions these countries emitted in 2020 now. So we see that there is quite a lot of room for improvement when we talk about the ambition. And why I stress this is because this provides us the pathway. How much coal do we phase out by 2030? How much renewables do we deploy? This directly engages in all of the key aspects that I actually mentioned before regarding how much the just transition is addressed through all of this. There are few assessments on the national level, which I'm not going to get into all of the discussion today, because I definitely want to leave room for improvement. Maybe, I don't know why it's not turning. Maybe one of the very key important point about Bosnia and Herzegovina is that the official NECP actually still misses the section B, which is the analytical part that has not been submitted to the Energy Community Secretariat. At least that is not available on the website. So Bosnia and Herzegovina needs to develop the analytical part on how the proposed policies and measures compare against to the two scenarios with existing measures and the one with the additional measures. And for Kosovo, well, there is they actually surpass their greenhouse gas emission reduction target, but there is a lot of emphasis on the renewables, but we do not actually see in the NECPs how is the plan to integrate them, what kind of technologies and capacities. We know solar, we know wind, but we do not understand how big of these industries are. Are we talking about huge investments? Where are the prosumers in all of this? How much do they account for that? Do we allow for the democratization of the energy system, etc.? And how actually can the grids integrate all of them? These are kind of the questions which miss from the NECP. And what is it for Kosovo true and all other countries? We see increase in the industrial emissions. We have long way been since decoupling of economic growth and the increase in the emissions, and we do not actually see that in the NECP and how much that is reflected. And the last for Serbia, maybe what to highlight, and we need alignment with the targets. We need alignment of the 2030 adopted and negotiated targets at the Energy Community Secretariat in line with the national plans. And Serbia actually falls short in the renewables. And then we need to actually assess the credibility and of some of the key policies and measures that are like it's the carbon pricing. Earlier, Adam and some of my predecessors talked about the importance of the carbon pricing because it leverages, it creates opportunity, it incentivizes the change from the current way of working. For much more details, I am very much inviting you to read the report. I am here all day and tomorrow to discuss the findings, but here are some of the discussion food for thought and for the discussion. So, in order to address the just transition part, I recommend wholeheartedly to actually address all of these key issues because there is time and there should be a political will to actually follow through with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Viktor, for the food. Actually, I think it's coffee time, but I think food is also welcome. I saw a lot of you taking snapshots. I think this presentation is going to be available on the organizer's website or somehow distributed. So yes, I will.
It should be in the slide, but also available immediately on the web page where you can actually see the full report.
Okay, so do not worry, you have a chance to take a closer glance and also talk to Viktor in person. I actually am fully aware that we're eating into your coffee break, which is a very dangerous territory that I don't want to eat too much, but I would like to open the floor to some of you or those of you online. I know there's a big group of people online. We don't see you, but we know that you're there. And I'll take two questions on a first come, first serve basis. Yes, I see one hand, one question gone. Second question sold. If there's still maybe one online question, I can take it, let's say, if it's a short one, please. Introduce yourself, if you can.
Nevena Smilovska, CE Cwetsch Network. While I will not debate the definition of public consultation, which is definitely different for decision makers and for CSOs, as we noticed that Nikos and Viktor both pointed out, I have a question for Ms. Knežević, for Ms. Shabani-Mullarama, and for Ms. Kankaraš. You all mentioned documents related to climate, energy, and just transition. So it's different documents. Nevertheless, they have the same goal. My question is, when can we expect to have adopted, so not drafts, adopted just transition action plans for your countries? And if they are unlikely to be adopted the next year, so by the end of 2024, which I assume is true.
Okay, that was meant to be one question. It already sounded suspiciously like two, divided
no,
by
it's
three
one.
people. So we
are
it's
in
dangerous territory here, Nevena.
It's one, yeah. Yeah, well, you know me, sorry. Yeah, so if it is unlikely that they will be adopted, are your countries considering local just transition plans, such as territorial just transition plan equivalents for the municipalities which will be affected? Thank you very much.
Okay, I will leave this for volunteer. Maybe I'll take the second question before I let a volunteer answer. I saw a hand here. Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Ayla. I'm from Bosnia. So my question is like more comment. So we are talking about today like about lessons learned and what are the good practices. But I would say it's very important to talk about failures and challenges. So the panelists from the Greece, so I like you emphasize the funding and participation as a very important. I think it would be very useful for the countries that are currently in transition to have like those kind of challenges, we don't like to call them failures, like to see what others did wrong so that we don't need to repeat those mistakes. Let's say Greece, Slovenia, and other countries. So I think that's like something very important that we should pay attention to. Thank you very much.
Yes, that was indeed a very interesting actually checklist for just transition. Okay, well, I'll let you answer. I'll just check with the organizer if maybe there's a question online. So we do integrate our online participants, at least in that extent. Branka, you were the volunteer, brave one. There you go.
Hvala. Vezano za prvo pitanje, ono što bih željela odmah na početku naglasiti je da smo integrisani energetski i klimatski plan Bosne i Hercegovine, kao što sam pomenula, radili u skladu sa dimenzijama energetske unije, a sve u cilju ispunjavanja zajedničkog cilja energetske unije, da dobijemo znači energiju koja će biti sigurna, održiva, pristupačna i konkurentna za sve potrošače, računajući i građane i preduzeća. Ovo je veoma značajno istaći prije nego što pomenem ono što je gospođa pitala, prvo pitanje. U toku procesa izrade energetskog i klimatskog plana Bosne i Hercegovine javila se potreba i zatražena je i tehnička asistencija koju smo imali od strane Svjetske banke za izradu mape puta za pravednu tranziciju regiona bogatih ugljem u Bosni i Hercegovini. Značajno je da pomenem da je ovaj dokument u drugom ciklusu konsultacija. Prvi put je bio predstavljen nacrt mape puta prije godinu dana. Nakon toga smo prikupljali komentare, sugestije, mišljenja i dokument je unaprijeđen i trenutno je u toku drugi ciklus konsultacija. Ovo je veoma značajno jer ovo pitanje koje se tiče pravedne tranzicije regiona bogatih ugljem upravo se javilo u toku procesa izrade energetskog i klimatskog plana Bosne i Hercegovine, imajući u vidu da se planira plan koji se odnosi na energetski sektor, uvažavajući klimatske ciljeve. I ono što bih još dodala vezano za izlaganje kolege Viktora iz Can Europe, a odnosi se na podlogu koju smo imali za naše ciljeve, a u ovom prostoru panela koliko imamo vremena, možda nisam imala vremena pomenuti, ali želim također da su ciljevi koji su usvojeni u energetskom i klimatskom planu Bosne i Hercegovine zasnovani na činjenicama i rezultatima procesa modelovanja pomoću alata LEAP u koji su bili uključeni kolege iz tri uspostavljena centra za modelovanje u Bosni i Hercegovini. Inače, na samom planu energetskom i klimatskom radilo je više od 120 osoba uključenih u 5 tematskih radnih grupa i uz pomoć eksperata koji su bili angažovani za pomoć za pojedine tematske oblasti. Hvala.
Thanks, Branka. Is there maybe a quick question online?
Yes, thank you. We have 2 questions from online audience. Now? Okay. So the first one is there any legislation or policies in place regarding the treatment of overloaded landfills of ash and slag after coal burning in these countries?
And the second question is for Mr. Mantzaris. What will be the role of gas in the future energy mix of Greece, and what is the status of the East Med gas pipeline?
Wow, quite concrete. Anybody knows on legislation or landfills in their contracting parties? No, you don't. Okay, maybe it's too specific then to answer. Then the second question is all yours.
Okay, about gas in Greece. So, according to the draft NECP, the role of gas is anticipated to be limited in the electricity sector, which is the main use of end use of gas in Greece. We use approximately 70% of the gas we import for electricity production. The rest goes to industry and domestic sector. So in electricity production, it's going to be limited. It's going to account for only 18% of the electricity that we produce in 2030, and then 2035 it's going to be way less. It's going to be very close to zero, actually. So Greece is close. If it increases slightly its ambition in renewables, it will go to carbon neutrality in the electricity sector by 2035, just like Germany or the UK, etc. Now, the East Med pipeline has it is an eventful situation. It comes, goes, etc. It has many problems, from what I understand in the design, funding. It's a multi-parameter problem, and I doubt that it's going to move forward given the EU policies and given the decreased use of gas all over the continent.
Okay, thank you very much. I know there's appetite for more, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have.